I think that's definitely really interesting. And for you, I know that you already like have a job, right? And getting
Yeah,
to that step is very difficult, I think, for a lot of college students. So
right.
I was curious,
Especially now.
hear more about your thoughts about, I guess, recruitment. I don't want to talk about this too much because it's like not that interesting, but I
Yeah.
do want to talk about, the culture around it. I remember, seeing all these LinkedIn posts about people like flexing, like in my space, like
It's
software
really
engineering, like,
irritating. No,
oh,
it's everywhere.
I got an internship at Google, I got an internship at Facebook, or like I got this job at Facebook and Google.
Right, right.
And
It's a big tech job. Yeah.
yeah, which is really exciting if they're in your network, right? You're like, wow, that's so awesome for my friend. But like when it's like someone that you don't know and you keep on getting inundated with these like updates, you're like, oh, I feel so bad about myself.
Right, right.
Um,
You can't help but feel insecure
yeah,
about yourself, but then you have to keep in mind that social media is designed to
right.
filter out bad stuff. It's like 90% of the content you see is just people bragging about themselves, for
True.
better or worse,
Yeah.
which
At least
is
on LinkedIn
irritating.
specifically. Yeah.
Or LinkedIn, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's
I guess
definitely
how do you, maintain your sanity like throughout this recruitment process? Because uh, like for software engineering, right? A lot of my close friends, actually, that's a lie. A few of my close friends are like software engineers, so like they are also recruiting for the same position. And I
right.
think inherently there's always going to be some sort of jealousy or some sort of competition amongst your peers, right? And how
Absolutely.
do you, I guess, you know, go get around that, that issue that I think is just inherent in, competitive college students. Like how do you get around, this sort of jealousy, or, you know, I guess to frame it in a better way, just like uh just a lot of ambitious and motivated people. Like how do you like, get around all that recruitment, stress?
That's a good question. And it's definitely true that there's a lot of stress, and you can't help but feel envious if, say, your classmate gets a job that you also applied for and weren't able
Right.
to get.
Yeah.
Um, and it makes it feel even worse if you think that perhaps
You're
you're a little bit
better.
more qualified,
Yeah, or more
right? But you
qualified.
have to keep
Yeah.
in mind that at the end of the day, there's two things to keep in mind. One is that interviewing is a numbers game, like you mentioned, for these really competitive jobs. There just aren't enough slots. There's more
Right.
qualified people than there are slots for these qualified people. So of
Right.
course, there's
Yeah.
going to be qualified people who don't make the final cut, and it's possible that you yourself may fall into that category as well if you get that rejection. Secondly, I think interviewing is an imperfect, flawed process.
I agree.
So, for
100%.
instance, it's really hard to get a full sense of how someone's going to perform in a job.
Right.
There's a lot of HR research that indicates that the best way of assessing how someone's going to do in a job and interview is finding out about their past performance, but quantifying that, standardizing that, comparing that against other candidates is really
Right.
difficult for
I
organizations.
definitely agree with that.
Um, for instance, a most qualified candidate for AI job might be an English major, but with a standard HR algorithm, they're going to filter out the educations and immediately discount the English major, even
Yeah.
though they would be the best
Which
fit for
is
that.
ridiculous. Yeah.
Which is kind of a shame. And even in the interview process, just because you don't have the technical know-how, you might get knocked out
Hmm.
of a first round or second round interview just because of that technical know-how, which is a barrier of entry and sometimes unfair for the candidates themselves.
Right.
So keeping those two considerations in mind has made things a bit better. Because I know for myself speaking, like I've been rejected from jobs and seen other people get jobs,
Yeah.
and having that like
Same.
little tinge of jealousy, that's just natural. It's a human reaction.
Yeah.
But then you have to think critically. It's like, okay,
How can you
one,
learn
it's a
from
very
this?
competitive
Yeah.
process. Like you're competing in a pool. Like Penn students are just generally very intelligent,
For
very
sure. Yeah.
very polished at interviewing. So when you're competing
Right.
against that type of caliber of students, you have to give yourself some forgiveness. And
I
also, you
think
have to
that's
keep in
really
mind,
good. Yeah.
third and finally, that the majority of people don't get the jobs that they dream of, right? And that's just
That's totally
natural.
true. Yeah.
Like I'm grateful for my job, but I have to be honest, like it's definitely not like my dream job, right?
I
So you
think
just
it's
keep that in
also a
mind.
little bit dangerous to have this notion of a dream job. That's my hot
No,
take.
I think it's fine to aspire, but you have to be
No,
comfortable.
I think aspiring is good, but like I feel like at a high level, like most people are like you're kind of just like a cog of a machine. Like if you're
Yeah.
working for like a big company, just to be honest. Like I
That's
don't know
true.
if
No,
that's
I'm
like
just saying it's
necessarily like
fine.
aspirational, but I think it's a good goal to work for those big companies to, you know, find yourself and learn those
No, it's
important
only if it's a
skills
good fit,
to make
right?
a
Like
huge
I
impact. Yeah.
work better for a large company where I have
Right.
clear hierarchy, clear order.
Yeah, if that's part of the culture, I'd be
Right.
totally down with
That's
it.
because of my
That's a
personal
good point.
preference. I know for you,
Yeah.
you're more flexible, more creative,
Yeah.
and more
Oh,
free
okay.
spirited, right? You don't
I
want
don't
to
know
work for a
about
big
that.
corporation. You actually care about social values, whereas I'm just like still figuring it out, right? So I
Yeah.
don't mind working for a structured corporation. But for those in my category, right, who are looking for those structured corporations, when you're going
Mhm.
for those types of really competitive jobs, yeah, you're
Yeah.
obviously going to be expiring for a few selective companies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got lucky to get into like PwC. Like
Yeah,
that's pretty
PwC is a
selective
great
already.
company. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's plenty of other ones as well that are really selective to get into.
Yeah.
People don't get into as well. And fourth and finally, just to return back to my earlier point, yeah, you also have to think about where you're at in the moment, and then realize that 90% of your peers, like in the world, are not in your same position, right?
Right.
In terms of
Yeah. Check
having
your
a
privilege. Yeah.
good college, I'm assuming, or even attending college in the first place is a
That
big
is,
thing.
yeah, a huge step. Yeah.
And also, people always get fixated on the notion of having like the perfect first job. I think that's pretty flawed. Everyone's
I
journey
agree with
path
that.
is a little bit different, and your career is going to be all over the place, right?
Mhm.
And what matters most is not being yourself up, but also just like continuing to grow, maintaining that growth mindset, and ensuring that you don't stagnate as you go into your job. Because for me personally, like I was definitely like sad because like I had a bunch of companies, right? Like big tech companies and like
Yeah.
other consulting
You
firms I
sure
really wanted to
did.
work for, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
I
as you
feel
know,
that.
I had interviews for all of them too. But yeah, of course, you
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
control what happens in the interview itself, how you're
Right.
viewed by your interviewers. All you can do is prepare the best you could.
Y-
And I knew I prepared very well for them. I
Right.
did hundreds of cases. For instance, I did dozens of mock interviews for
Right.
tech.
And you put in all that work. And I think that's an important
Absolutely. So you have to
point
go
to, you know, hit
recognize
on.
that as well. So if you're an applicant,
Right.
right, like say you're in the position I was as a junior or senior, like the position that you're in,
Mhm.
um, you have to recognize the work that you put in, and you have to
For
realize that
sure.
it does translate into real outcomes, even though you don't have the intended outcome that you wanted
Mhm.
to get, right? And you
Yeah.
have to be grateful too,
Yeah.
um, and just keep on moving on. Three.
No, that's definitely a great point. And I think one of my mentors told me a little while ago, once like I got my, you know, Etsy internship. And I told him like my honest shit, like, hey man, I got rejected from like my top choice of freshman year. And at that time, it's not my first choice now because of other reasons. But my first choice at that time was big tech Google. And I was like, that prestige, building a search engine, so exciting, Google Maps, all that amazing stuff.
Right.
And they have amazing products, right? I had an interview with Google at freshman year, and I was very excited. I thought you know, I prepared really hard for it, et cetera, et cetera. But then I just got rejected because they asked me about this algorithm that I didn't know, and I was very sad. But I told him about that, and he said, "Ethan, that doesn't matter. What matters is like the process you went through. You know, you took steps to, you know, prepare for those interviews. You took steps to improve your resume, improve your cover letter. Um, you did all these steps, and those steps will help you with whatever goals you have in the future and for your professional success and also for your happiness, right? Having that sort of drive and that work ethic is what is going to lead you to, you know, your next success or, you know, like a higher level of happiness. And I thought that was like a really great point. And something that you kind of hit on is you really have to focus on the process, not necessarily the result, because the result is sometimes out of your control. Sometimes they only have like a certain amount of slots, right? Or like in a general scheme of things, you know, stuff happens like out of your control, like freak like events happens, right? And then like you can't
Yeah,
control that,
absolutely. Yeah,
and you
you just
just
need
got
to
to focus
recognize
on
the
what you
effort.
did, right? And you know, you can learn so much from that, and you shouldn't discount
Yeah, you should be proud
what you
of
learn. You should be
the
proud.
effort and the work that you put into preparing for interviews. For instance, I was a little butthurt when we applied to that Apple PM
Oh,
job
let's
for
not talk about
interviews.
that. Wait, that's so funny. Oh, we can talk about this. So uh we both applied to this Apple Siri
Well,
PM
we both had
program.
interviews technically.
Yeah, and we both like did like the take home assignment, which is the first step. And with my consulting experience, my limited consulting experience, I was like, dude, I'll just deck this stuff and make it a PDF. And I thought mine was like really trash. And then Nathan's was like really good. Like I like looked at Nathan's, I was like, wow, this is a really good idea. Not to get into the details, but like in general, like his idea was like pretty revolutionary. Like it made sense in the scope of things and whatever, like in our current situation.
Yeah, but it also
Um,
probably wasn't in the technical language or
yeah,
in the
and like
framework that we wanted.
my thing is I just took I talked a lot about how it would like be released, like the product release cycle. Like I talked a lot about like teamwork and stuff, not necessarily about the product necessarily. And I talked a lot about like privacy since I know a lot about that based on like my consulting experience. Um and Nathan got rejected. He didn't get an interview and I got an interview, which was really funny because I have no PM experience and I would say that Nathan is 10 times smarter than me and 10 times more qualified.
No.
So
Don't say that. I
anyways,
think that
I failed the interview, which was a little bit, upsetting, but it was a great learning lesson, realizing
yeah, it's a
like,
form of experience.
how
Because I
difficult
realized,
PM interviews are.
then I realized then it's not PM and consulting are different. In consulting,
Right.
like the proposal I wrote would be fantastic. It tells a coherent story. It
Exactly.
tells
Like using
why.
the MISI framework, right? Mutually
No,
exclusive.
that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the storytelling
For sure.
aspect of it. So
Yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah.
for instance, wrote all the reasons why it would make a lot of sense to
Yeah, it
implement
made
the
a ton of sense when
feature,
I read it.
talked about the benefits,
Yeah.
whereas what they're looking for was more technical in terms of like Ethan mentioned the product release
Yeah.
cycle, looking
Like the
for
technical stuff, like
how they
when
would
you implement
validate
it.
your
Yeah. How do you
ideas,
test it? Yeah.
customer data,
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Data.
I didn't know that,
Yeah.
but I learned after I got
Yeah,
rejected. Oh,
it
that's
was a good
probably what I should
experience
have done.
too. Like honestly, it's a great program and like being part of it would have probably been a great step for a career. But for me, I realized like I was really blessed because it would put me in a very difficult situation. Like I think software engineering is the best fit for me in my current
Yeah,
place in life.
right,
Like
absolutely. I think
I
that'd
think
be
like honestly like I love programming and like building things from scratch and just like
programming is
giving
really
it to
fun.
you're learning programming too. I know we talked about this,
Right.
but like
And
it's
now I'm
really
a TA, so I
amazing.
get to
Yeah.
see how other people program, and it's really
Like
interesting
yeah.
because programming is like English in the sense that you're able to freely
Yeah,
express
it's like you're
yourself.
writing something. You're like it's so
It's
awesome,
like learning
right?
a different language.
Yeah, and like I think like programming is a superpower, right? You can do so much good with it. Like it's insane like the amount of applications you have for it.